The turkey was perfectly golden. I noticed because my mother had mentioned 3 times already that she'd spent 14 hours preparing it, and that some people contributed to the family while others just showed up expecting to be fed. I was apparently in the second category. The Hartwell family Christmas dinner was a tradition stretching back 4 generations, complete with heirloom china, grandmother's silver candlesticks, and the unspoken rule that everyone would pretend to be happier than they actually were. The dining room still had the same wallpaper from my childhood, hunter green with small gold fleurs-de-lis that I used to count during particularly long lectures about my potential. I'd counted 847 of them over the years. Some things never changed. More mashed potatoes, Daniel? Mom asked my brother, her voice dripping with the warmth she reserved exclusively for her firstborn. You've been working so hard at the firm. A partner before 40, we're so proud. Daniel accepted the bowl with a modest smile that fooled no one. At 38 he was the crown jewel of the Hartwell family. Corporate lawyer, corner office. A wife named Stephanie who came from old money. Everything our parents had ever wanted in a child. His house in the suburbs had 6 bedrooms. His children attended private school. His Christmas card photo, professionally shot, naturally, featured the entire family in coordinating cable-knit sweaters against a backdrop of their manicured lawn. It was the kind of success that could be measured, photographed, and displayed on refrigerators across the extended family network. Then there was me. The story of Ethan Hartwell as told by my family went something like this. Promising student, decent grades, inexplicably walked away from a stable consulting job 8 years ago to pursue opportunities in technology. Translation. I was a cautionary tale, the living embodiment of what happened when you didn't apply yourself, didn't follow the rules, didn't understand how the real world worked. They'd been telling this story for so long that even I sometimes forgot it wasn't true. Ethan, you're not eating much. Dad's observation carried the particular edge he'd perfected over 3 decades of disappointment. Still on that startup diet? You know, the one where you pretend to run a business while burning through whatever savings you have left. The food is delicious, Dad. I'm just pacing myself. Pacing yourself. He snorted. That's one way to describe your entire life, isn't it? Pacing yourself right into mediocrity. My Aunt Rebecca, seated across from me, tooted sympathetically. Now Richard, it's Christmas. What? Not talk about the elephant in the room? Dad gestured toward me with his fork. We've been tiptoeing around this for years. At some point we have to face facts. My grandmother, seated at the far end of the table, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. She'd stopped defending me years ago, not because she agreed with my parents, but because she'd learned that intervention only made things worse. Stephanie dabbed her lips with her napkin, her eyes bright with the particular gleam of someone about to join in on acceptable cruelty. Daniel was telling me about your venture, Ethan. Something about software. It's so brave of you to keep trying after all these failures. It's not really brave, Daniel corrected, refilling his wine glass. It's more like delusion. What is it this time, little brother? Another app that nobody wants? A website that solves a problem that doesn't exist? Something like that, I said pleasantly. Dad set down his fork with enough force to make the silverware rattle. You know what kills me, Ethan? You had every opportunity. Same schools as Daniel. Same advantages. Your mother and I sacrificed everything to give you both the same start in life. I know, Dad. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent the last decade proving that some people just don't have what it takes. Still living off savings at 33. Still working on projects. He made air quotes around the words the same way he had for years. At some point, a man has to admit defeat and get a real job. Your father just wants what's best for you, Mom said. We all do. We see you struggling, pretending everything is fine, and it breaks our hearts. I'm not struggling, Mom. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment in a building that doesn't even have a doorman. You drive that old Honda. You haven't taken a proper vacation in years. Mom sighed, the particular sigh she reserved exclusively for conversations with me, heavy with disappointment and the weight of unfulfilled expectations. Richard, don't upset yourself. You know how your blood pressure gets. Ethan is who he is. We've accepted that. Have we? Dad's eyes bore into mine. Have we really accepted that our youngest son is going to spend his entire life as a financial burden? That he'll never contribute anything meaningful to this family, or to society? The dining room fell silent. Even Daniel had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, though not uncomfortable enough to defend me. I took another bite of turkey. It really was excellent. You know, Dad continued, warming to his favorite subject, I ran into George Patterson last week. You remember George? His son Michael started that accounting firm downtown. 20 employees now. Real office, real clients, real revenue. George couldn't stop talking about how proud he was. That's wonderful for Michael. It is wonderful. It's what success looks like, Ethan. Not sitting in your apartment pretending that your coding projects are going to amount to something. Mom nodded along, her expression a perfect blend of pity and resignation. We just worry about you, sweetheart. What happens when the savings run out? Do you have a plan? A real plan? I have a plan, Mom. Let me guess. More venture capital rejection letters? More investor meetings that go nowhere. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the picture of successful condescension. I've told you 100 times, Ethan. Tech startups are a young man's game. You're too old to be playing entrepreneur. Cut your losses and find something stable. Like what? Stephanie asked. What would someone with Ethan's unique skill set even do in the real world? Entry-level something, Daniel suggested. IT support maybe? I hear they're always hiring people who can restart computers and clear browser caches. Dad barked out a laugh. From dreaming about Silicon Valley to resetting passwords. That's quite a journey. The laughter spread around the table. Mom tried to hide her smile behind her napkin. Even my grandmother chuckled softly before catching herself. I finished my bite and reached for my water glass. This is really good stuffing, Mom. What's the secret ingredient? Don't change the subject, Dad snapped. We're having an important conversation here. We're having the same conversation we've had at every family gathering for the past 5 years, Dad. I could probably recite it from memory. Maybe if you actually listened. I listen. I hear every word. I set down my glass and looked at my father directly. You think I'm a failure. You think my business is a waste of time. You think I should give up and become someone who makes you comfortable to brag about at dinner parties. That's not. It is what you think. And you're entitled to your opinion. I smiled at him, genuinely without malice. But opinions aren't facts, Dad. They're just opinions. Dad's face reddened. Don't you lecture me about facts, young man. The fact is you haven't earned a real paycheck in years. The fact is you're burning through money while the rest of us work for a living. The fact is. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, irritation flickering across his face. It's the bank. Probably about that mortgage refinancing. He silenced the call and set the phone face down. Where was I? The facts, I supplied helpfully. Right. The fact is. His phone rang again. Same number. For God's sake. He picked it up. Hello? Yes, this is Richard Hartwell. What? I'm in the middle of Christmas dinner. Can this wait until? He paused, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. What do you mean terminated? What corporate funding? The table fell silent. Daniel exchanged a glance with Stephanie. Mom's brow furrowed with concern. I don't understand, Dad continued into the phone. Our business account has been. What do you mean someone was funding it? That's impossible. We've been profitable for years. We're completely self-sustaining. I took another sip of water and watched my father's face cycle through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, the first tremors of panic. Can you repeat that? The anonymous corporate backer who's been subsidizing our operating costs. For how long? 7 years. Dad's voice cracked. That's not possible. I would have known. I review the accounts personally. Mom was gripping his arm now, her face pale. Daniel had set down his wine glass. All trace of smugness evaporated. And this backer is withdrawing all support effective immediately? Dad pressed the phone harder against his ear. What does that mean for us? How much have they been contributing? What's our actual? Oh my God. Oh my God. He lowered the phone slowly, his hand trembling. Richard. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. What is it? What's wrong? That was Marcus Whitfield, the senior account manager at First Continental. Dad stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. He says someone has been anonymously funding our business for the past 7 years. Covering gaps in cash flow. Paying for equipment upgrades. Subsidizing the lease on the warehouse. That's ridiculous, Daniel said. Your business is successful. You've shown me the profit margins yourself. The profit margins were manufactured. Dad's voice was hollow. Without this mystery backer, we've apparently been operating at a loss of roughly $890,000 per year. The money was being funneled through a shell corporation called Hartwell Family Trust Holdings. I thought it was just an old account from your grandfather's estate. It's not. Mom asked. No. It's. Marcus says the beneficial owner is withdrawing all support as of January 1st. He's requesting an immediate audit of our actual financial position. Dad looked up, his eyes finding mine across the table. He also said the owner wants to meet with us. Tonight. I set down my napkin. Actually, that won't be necessary. The words hung in the air for a moment before comprehension began to dawn. Ethan. My mother's voice was barely audible. What are you saying? I'm saying that the meeting isn't necessary because I'm already here. Dad stared at me. You're the anonymous backer? That's absurd. You don't have that kind of money. You're living off savings, for God's sake. I was never living off savings, Dad. I folded my hands on the table. I was living off the returns from my first company, which I sold 6 years ago for $47 million. The savings you were so worried about were actually generating about $3.2 million in annual investment returns. The silence that followed was absolute. The company I sold, I continued, was called QuickRoute. It was a logistics optimization platform. You might remember me mentioning it about 8 years ago, around the time you told me to stop wasting time on computer nonsense and get a real job. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. After the sale, I started investing in other ventures. Some failed. Most succeeded. My current portfolio includes stakes in 14 companies across 5 industries, with a combined valuation of approximately $340 million. My personal net worth as of last quarter's assessment is around $127 million. Daniel had gone pale. That's not, you can't. I can. I did. I looked at my brother with something that might have been pity. Remember last year when your firm was struggling to make partner bonuses? The anonymous client who brought in that $2.3 million case? That was one of my companies. I specifically routed the work to your team. Why? The word came out strangled. Because you're my brother. Because despite everything, I wanted you to succeed. I turned to my parents. The same reason I've been quietly funding your business for 7 years. Because you're my family. Because the business was your dream and I couldn't watch it fail. Mom had started crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad sat frozen, his face a mask of shock and shame. Every time you mocked me at these dinners, I said, keeping my voice level, I went home and transferred another $50,000 to the shell corporation that was keeping your doors open. Every time you called me a failure, I covered another month of your warehouse lease. Every time you told me to get a real job, I was running a private equity operation that employs more people than your entire company. Ethan. Dad's voice broke. The money you thought I was burning through? Those were the profits from investments that are now funding a children's hospital wing in Seattle, 3 scholarship programs, and a small business incubator that's launched 47 successful companies. I paused. But you never asked about any of that, did you? You assumed. You judged. You decided who I was without ever asking who I'd become. My grandmother was smiling now, a small knowing smile that told me she'd suspected something all along. The funding withdrawal is real, I said. I've decided that continuing to support people who call me a financial burden isn't healthy for anyone. Your business will need to stand on its own merits now or fail on them. That's not cruelty, it's honesty. Dad finally found his voice. Ethan, please. We didn't know. How could we have known? You could have asked. I stood, pushing my chair back from the table. In 7 years of family dinners, not once did anyone ask about my actual work. Not once did anyone express genuine curiosity about what I was building. You were so committed to the story of Ethan the failure that you never considered the alternative. We'll apologize, Mom said quickly, desperately. We'll tell everyone we were wrong. We'll make it right. Whatever you want, Ethan. You'll do whatever you feel is right, Mom. But the apology isn't why I'm telling you this. Then why? Daniel asked, his voice hollow. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because I'm tired of pretending to be less than I am to make this family comfortable. And because, I paused, making sure I had everyone's attention. Because Marcus from the bank will be calling back in about 10 minutes with the actual numbers, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. What numbers? Dad asked. The real financial position of Hartwell Industries. Without my subsidies. I reached for my coat, which had been draped over the back of my chair. You're approximately $6.2 million in debt. The warehouse lease is 3 months behind. 2 of your major clients are about to default on outstanding invoices totaling over $400,000. And your line of credit was maxed out in September. I've been covering the minimum payments since then. Dad looked like he might be sick. Mom had gone completely pale, her hand pressed against her chest. The equipment upgrades you thought came from retained earnings? That was me. The bridge loan that got you through the 2021 supply chain crisis? Me. The insurance settlement that seemed generous after the warehouse fire? I made up the difference between what you received and what you actually needed. I've arranged for a 6-month transition period, I continued, shrugging on my coat. During that time, I'll work with your accountants to identify a realistic path forward. But the days of invisible support are over. If Hartwell Industries survives, it will be because you made it survive, not because I secretly propped it up while you told everyone how disappointed you were in me. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and Daniel? I turned to look at my brother. The partner track at your firm isn't as guaranteed as you think. There's a restructuring planned for Q2. 3 of the senior partners are being bought out. Daniel's face drained of color. How do you know about that? One of my portfolio companies is acquiring a 34% stake in your firm's parent corporation. The deal closes in February. I smiled without warmth. I'll be reviewing all personnel files as part of the due diligence. I'm sure your work speaks for itself. You can't do that, Daniel said. That's revenge. It's business, Daniel. Something you've been lecturing me about for years. If your work is as excellent as you've always claimed, you have nothing to worry about. I opened the door, letting the cold December air rush in. Ethan, wait. Mom stood, nearly knocking over her chair. Please. It's Christmas. You can't just leave like this. Actually, Mom, I can. I pulled my keys from my pocket. I have a flight to catch. I'm spending the rest of the holidays in Switzerland with some business partners. We're finalizing an acquisition that will probably make the news in a few weeks. But what about us? Her voice cracked. What happens to us? I paused on the threshold, looking back at my family. My successful brother who wasn't as successful as he thought. My proud father whose pride had been built on my invisible foundation. My mother who had worried so much about my future that she'd never noticed my present. What happens to you is up to you, I said. For the first time in 7 years, your success or failure is entirely in your own hands. Consider it my Christmas gift. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. A Tesla Model S that I'd parked 2 blocks away so my parents wouldn't see it. A text from Marcus Whitfield. Call complete. Your father took it about as well as expected. Should I proceed with the transition documentation? I typed back, yes. And make sure the 6-month support package is properly structured. I want them to have a real chance. Marcus replied immediately. Understood. For what it's worth, Mr. Hartwell, I think you're being more generous than they deserve. I considered that for a moment, then typed, they're my family, Marcus. Generosity isn't about deserving. It's about who you choose to be. I slid into the driver's seat and started the car. The dashboard lit up with the soft glow of expensive engineering, a far cry from the beat-up Honda my parents still believed I drove. My phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom. Then Dad. Then Daniel again. I silenced my phone and pulled away from the curb. The drive to the airport took 40 minutes through light holiday traffic. I spent most of it thinking about the look on my father's face when he realized the truth. Not the shock of the financial revelation, but the deeper shock beneath it. The realization that he'd spent 7 years lecturing a man who had been quietly, invisibly, keeping his entire world from collapsing. I thought about all the Sunday dinners where he'd held court about business strategy, about hard work, about what it took to build something from nothing. He'd been so confident, so certain that his success was earned, that his wisdom was hard-won through experience and grit. He'd lectured me about financial responsibility while his company hemorrhaged money that I kept silently replacing. The truth was messy. The truth was that his business had been bleeding money for years while his youngest son silently transfused it back to life. The truth was that his pride had been built on a foundation he didn't know existed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Mostly I felt tired. At the airport, my pilot was waiting by the private terminal. "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell. The flight plan to Geneva is filed and we're cleared for takeoff whenever you're ready." "Thank you, James. Let's not waste any time." I climbed the stairs to my Gulfstream and settled into the leather seat by the window. As the engines powered up and the plane began to taxi, I pulled out my laptop and opened my investment dashboard. $127 million in verified assets. 14 active portfolio companies. 3 charitable foundations. A reputation in the industry as one of the most astute investors of my generation. And a family that had never bothered to ask. The plane lifted off and Chicago fell away beneath me. All those houses lit up for Christmas. All those families gathered around tables, sharing food and conversation and the particular kind of love that comes without conditions. My phone had accumulated 17 missed calls and 23 text messages by the time we reached cruising altitude. I scrolled through a few of them. "Ethan, please call us. We need to talk. I can't believe this is happening. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please let me explain. I was wrong about everything. Daniel. Son, I don't know what to say. I was wrong. About everything. The things I said. I'm so ashamed. Can we start over? Dad. This is Aunt Rebecca. I just wanted you to know that I always thought they were too hard on you. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. Your grandmother told us about the hospital wing. We had no idea. None of us did. Mom. Please come back. It's Christmas. We're family. Dad. I typed a response to the family group chat. I'll be in touch after the new year. In the meantime, I've arranged for a financial consultant to meet with you on the 27th. Her name is Sandra Chin. She's the best in the business. I've worked with her on 3 successful turnarounds. Listen to her, do what she says, and you'll get through this. The 6-month transition package I've set up will give you breathing room, but it's up to you to use it wisely. I paused, then added, I love you all. That was never the question. The love was never conditional for me. The question was whether you loved me, the actual me, not the version of me that made you feel comfortable about your own choices. I hope you'll think about that while I'm gone. Real love doesn't require performance. It doesn't require proof of worth. It doesn't require constant achievement or status or success measured in terms other people recognize. I hope someday you'll understand that. I sent the message and turned off my phone. Outside the window, the world was dark and vast and full of possibility. The stars were brighter up here, away from the city lights, and the moon cast a silver glow across the clouds below us. Somewhere far below, my parents were sitting in their dining room, probably still stunned, definitely making phone calls and comparing notes and trying to reconstruct the past 7 years in light of everything they'd just learned. They would be fine. I'd made sure of it. The 6-month transition package, the financial consultant, the carefully structured off-ramp from dependency, all of it was designed to give them the tools to succeed on their own. And Daniel? Well, Daniel would have to prove himself now. If he was as talented as he'd always claimed, the acquisition would be good for his career. If he wasn't, at least he'd finally know the truth about himself. Whether they used these opportunities was up to them. The flight attendant appeared with a glass of scotch. Macallan 25, my favorite. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Hartwell? Chef Andrea has prepared a light Christmas meal whenever you're ready. Maybe in an hour. This is perfect for now. Of course, sir. Just press the call button whenever you're ready. She withdrew silently, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the vast darkness outside the window. I sipped my drink and watched the stars wheel past. In a few hours I'd land in Geneva and spend a week with people who respected my work, valued my insights, and never once questioned whether I was living up to my potential. Partners who evaluated ideas based on merit. Colleagues who measured success by impact rather than appearance. A world where the old Honda and the one-bedroom apartment would have been seen for what they actually were. Strategic choices, not signs of failure. And then, after the new year, I'd go back home and begin the long, difficult process of rebuilding my relationship with my family. On honest terms this time, without the invisible scaffolding of my secret support. It would be uncomfortable. There would be awkward conversations and defensive reactions and probably a fair amount of resentment on their part. Learning that your entire self-image has been built on a foundation you didn't know existed tends to shake people. But maybe that shaking was necessary. Maybe the only way to build something real was to tear down the comfortable lies first. It wouldn't be easy. But nothing worth doing ever was. My phone was still off, but I could picture the chaos I'd left behind. The urgent conversations, the desperate calculations, the dawning recognition that the family failure had been the family foundation all along. I could imagine Dad reviewing the accounts for the 100th time, looking for some explanation that didn't end with his youngest son's hidden empire. I could see Mom alternating between tears and frantic planning. I could picture Daniel, his professional confidence crumbling, wondering for the first time in his life whether he'd actually earned anything he had. Maybe they would change. Maybe they wouldn't. But at least now they knew the truth, and truth was always the first step toward something better. I finished my scotch and closed my eyes, letting the hum of the engines carry me toward whatever came next. Some people peaked early. Some people failed spectacularly. And some people, the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who built their empires in silence while the world underestimated them, simply waited for the right moment to reveal what they'd become. Tonight had been my moment. And for the first time in 7 years, sitting in my private jet above the clouds while my family grappled with a reality they'd never bothered to see, I felt genuinely, completely free. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just free. Free from the performance. Free from the pretense. Free from watching them build their confidence on a foundation I'd secretly constructed. Free from the exhausting work of being underestimated. It was, I decided, the best Christmas gift I could have given myself. The stars continued their silent dance outside my window as the Atlantic stretched beneath us. And for the first time in years, the future felt like something to embrace rather than endure.